Okay, we have a scene right here stamped on the Mohawk Everyday Digital white coated silk paper. And this lesson, it's kind of about, it's me testing out the paper again with some layered dye-based ink types of effects. But I thought we would do some things that are a little bit more gestural and kind of the addition of some visual movement into a scene. And just by adjusting kind of the application direction of our inks and whatnot, and the addition of some extra texture in terms of the Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white splatter painting in this scene. But, I don't know, it's kind of a fun little scene to escape into during a hot summer day, month, heat wave, or whatever. You know, when you're doing these types of things, you can kind of escape into them during the period of time that you're working on them. And, you know, when you're looking and kind of, I don't know, get transported into a cooler color scheme scene. And then this additional of kind of movement with, you know, achieved by kind of these slightly more diagonal or angled arcing strokes of your inks kind of adds to this kind of more, you know, slightly windier type of feel. All right, now as I was working at the end of this scene, I thought, okay, I'm not going to add any additional white paint pen looks, but I like this scene, so why not? I might as well finish it. Sometimes I finish these scenes a little bit more off camera, but let's go and add a little bit of a kind of snowy peaks to this mountain in the background. This is a white paint, acrylic paint pen here. Okay. See, I'm just kind of pulling out these peaks a little bit more with some white paint on them like that. Look, kind of gives them a little bit more of this snowy summit type of you know, characteristic. I won't add it everywhere. I just kind of do it in the lighter areas like that. Okay, so anyway, okay, one more place. How about a little bit like kind of snow building up on the rooftop a little bit. It's subtle, but you can kind of pull some of these little areas out with some additional tone on them in the form of white paint, like this fence. Okay, kind of makes things a little bit more three-dimensional when you put some white highlights on some things. Okay, so anyway, a few little white highlights on this fence here, rooftop, and mountain peaks in the distance. So kind of near and far, there's kind of a relationship between those two different distances. In this case, in a very subtle way, of course, but I don't know. Fun stuff. Oh my gosh. I was thinking, when I added that little northern, you know, North Star in my last piece, that really kind of stood out in a very nice way. But maybe I'll do that again right here. All right, darn it. This quick kind of intro has turned into kind of a refinement part of the scene. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little dot down here. It's just one of those little splatter painted dots, but let's go like this. Okay, so starting off with a little dot, I do these downstrokes with my pen. Okay, that looks like a comet, like right now. That one. This star I don't think will stand out too much, because it's kind of in a lighter area, but well, I don't know. We'll see. Kind of taper your arms of your star. That one came out a little bit fat. Okay. I'm kind of watching out this tree because it's still a little bit wet and I don't want to smear those leaves. Actually, the star is not going to be very small. It's looking a little bit fatter than what I thought it would. I was starting off with such a tiny little dot. It's a little bit more Christmassy, though. You know, in terms of a winter scene. Let me try to go with Okay, there we go. All right. Huge star, kind of. Like that. Kind of North Star type of notion. Okay, so anyways, little refinements there. Suddenly, I don't know if that's a refinement so much as now it seems like it's the focal point of the entire scene. Refinement in terms of size, though, I guess. All right, let me... Now I need to add one more thing. These are not planned videos, like finely choreographed videos. Let me go find this other image and let's put... Okay, I have a doe here. I don't know, here's my concept here. I added something so kind of visually strong in the background, and I want to balance it off with some other type of focal point for the foreground here. Let's just do this one in a Marvy black. Let's not have it so strong that it stands out way too much. It'll be a visual anchor point for sure, but it just won't be in as strong a black as the Versafine black, which I've retained for the the really close images with the leaves and the reeds large. Okay, when you're stamping something that's standing in grass, okay, wipe off some of the legs, some of the feet, so it looks like it's standing in the grass, right? Because you won't be able to see the feet as much. Now, how tall the grass is, will determine how much of this you're wiping off, but I kind of wiped off a little bit more off the bottom part, and then I wipe off a little bit less off the top of it. You'll hear me talking about that if you watch this video as I stamp out the mountains in the background. Okay, so let's go... I'll go about right here. Okay, so anyways, I think that kind of finishes off the piece. That's going to dry lighter than how it looks right now, so it'll be about as dark as this one. This is stamped out in Marvy black as well, so that'll be about the same kind of value of it in terms of light and dark. But anyways, okay, so anyways, this video is about kind of movement and gesture, visual gesture in pieces. Okay, but it's also a good experiment for me, once again, working on this particular type of paper that's very new to me, but I really do like the surface quality, and I do like that kind of textural difference from, I don't know, I guess these Versafine oil-based impressions over the top of water-based media in terms of all the other inks that have been used on here. I need to use some hybrid inks on this paper coming up as a test as well, but a fun little scene here, and it's an easy one. This one's a little bit of a bigger project because I'm using a half-page piece, but I just wanted to give myself more room to do these swipes in here, in creating kind of more of a gestural kind of statement in terms of my color application in the background. And that gave me a little bit of a chance to play around with some white pigment inks in the background as well, some things that I haven't done before, due to the paper and paper media combination. Okay, so anyways, if you watch this video, I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Okay, this video is about creating visual movement and gesture in a scene. One way to do that is to just create a kind of gesture with your ink application. it starts a certain type of kind of energy of the piece, and I'll show you an easy way to do that. Okay, so we're just going to do this one. We're going to make kind of a winter scene. It's really, we're going through a heat wave here in Southern California, and I wouldn't mind escaping too during the process of the making of this video into kind of a cooler, kind of blustery winter scene. Some people even start doing their Christmas cards around this time, so that's what I will be doing here. Okay. I thought I would do this around the cabin with fence. I haven't used this stamp in a while. Always fun to use. Very easy to use. And I am stamping this on the Mohawk Everyday Digital White Coated Silk. Even sounds kind of like a cool type of paper to use. Basically what it is it's a coated paper, but instead of it being glossy, it's somewhere in between matte and glossy. It's probably, I don't know, it's probably a, 25% glossier than glossy paper, but still closer to matte than glossy, okay? It's got a little bit of a sheen to it, okay? You can see here, a kind of sheen to it. You can see it more where I stamped out that cabin in there, but I don't know, not super reflective like a gloss, okay? It's kind of, I don't know, it's maybe a little bit more interesting than matte. I don't know. I mean, there are certain things you can do on matte, just due to that slight bit of texture than what you can do with this paper. But this paper is really nice in terms of the holding of the kind of the intensity and value of the inks that you apply to this. Okay. With that being said, I've been really surprised of late with my experiments at just how much even matte uncoated paper can potentially hold that intensity and glossiness of the inks themselves. I don't know. I mean, it's not anything compared to a coated paper like this, or glossy, but I don't know, surprising. Okay, so I'm just building up this area down here. That was with the grass texture. I usually use sedge filler, but I don't know. I didn't happen to see it on my desk, and I didn't feel like going and looking for it, but I haven't used this grass texture in terms of an overall kind of a texturing device, from front to back like this in a while either. So I'm just showing you can just kind of play around with scale and everything when it comes to scenic stamping. Stampscape stamps, it's meant to be really universal. So a tree cluster and the top of tree cluster, the tops of them representing trees farther off in the distance like that, by just masking off and stamping down. Let's do, I mean, it could be trees in the background like that when you just use the tops of them, but it could just be smaller trees or whatnot. I can do these in the foreground like this, and I can mask off the bottom a little bit. It just gives it a little bit more variation. You get the benefit of variation, which is really good in design. Okay, a repetition of form, but it's a variation in kind of scale. We're not really changing the scale of it. We're just using kind of a smaller portion of it, but it kind of gives the illusion of scale by just using less and less of it, okay? So it's just an easy way to kind of depict depth, but just by using one stamp like that, okay? It makes for an easy use, that's for sure, and easy kind of masking kind of concept methodology. All right, let's see. Let's go with a little bit of a fence here. The foreground. Okay, I'll just go here. Something like that. Kind of a little opening right there. I don't know, I could fence it all off, but sometimes I don't like to fence it all off because I like to leave an opening for the viewer to enter the scene through, okay? That's the concept, at least. Doesn't have to always be done that way. Okay, now I am adding in a lot more of the composition here than what I often do sometimes, but I just want to show you kind of what you're building around. And also when you do things like this, it's a little bit easier for you to see kind of what's going on from a composition standpoint and a lighting standpoint. I could put in all of the background first, okay, with what we're going to do after this. And then I could stamp all of this right over the top of it. But this will give us a little bit more control because I could see where, you know, specific trees are going to be, the cabin, and so on and so forth. Okay? So that's often one of the questions is, you know, do you lay this down first or do you do the background colors first? Well, you can kind of do it either way or a combination of both. I could stamp out a few things, lay down a bunch of color, and then add in kind of more designs right over the top of it. And then, you know, you can add in more color if you need to. And that's often the case, or usually the case. It's not usually kind of like a one, you know, process, you know, linear type of thing. It's more kind of a circular type of process of addition, not subtraction, but layering. Okay, this is the tiny rock stamp. So kind of layering these types of things in here, all of these different textures kind of add to kind of the potential visual richness. By doing all these different textures, it gets a little bit busy. Let's see if I look real close down here, but that's not what this scene is going to look like once I start adding in all the different colors and tones and shadow textures and whatnot. Or shadow, not textures, but shadow additions. It'll look quite different, so I'm not really worried about all that type of thing. Which isn't to say I'm not thinking about it, though. Okay, so anyways, that's our foundation right here. And I mean, I could go in here, and if I want to, I can add in additional sky figures and whatnot. I'm thinking about it, but I think I'll leave it as is, but maybe I'll use some mountains in the background, though. Let's do that. I'll show you a little trick here while we're at it. Let's, instead of just adding in just mountains in the background, okay, what I'm going to do, things in the distance are often lighter than things in the foreground, so I'm just inking this up in black. You know, we're talking about, you know, utilizing our stamps in certain ways to get kind of more use out of them, okay? So I stamped this off once, so in theory this is going to be a lot lighter when I stamp it out a second time, right? Because the ink is drier on here, there's not as much ink. And then what I'm also doing is I'm kind of removing a good deal of ink off the bottom portion, but I'm removing a little bit less and a little bit less, so I have kind of the secondary impression from this one, and then all this is kind of wiped off to a certain degree. I don't want it completely wiped off, okay? But I want a certain amount of it. Okay, when you're stamping over solid imagery like a black tree, you don't need to mask those off, right? You understand why? Because stamping a lighter object right over the top of them, it's not as if the mountain is going to look like it's in the foreground, okay? So see, I just stamped out right over that. But if I stamp into the cabin right here, this is an open area. So I don't want to get some of those, you know, mountain textures in the rooftop here. So I have to cover that up. But if you're covering up a solid tree, you know, or stamping right over a solid tree, it doesn't matter. You just stamp right over the top of it, okay? So some people are kind of worried about, like, I need to mask off all of this or something like that. You don't, because they're solid. And again, that's how I design my images, okay? I design them that way so that it alleviates the need for certain types of tedium, okay? So all those things are kind of thought out ahead of time. You kind of have to get used to it if you're, you know, just constantly doing very careful masking all the time, because you're used to using outline designs, but these ones are solid and tonal, okay? All right, now see, if I stamp out another mountain out this way, Well, maybe I'll stamp it a little bit lower just so it doesn't look so repetitious. These trees are solid. This area down here is open, okay? I wiped off the bottom of this. I don't really need to, I probably don't even need to cover this up, but I will, just in case, okay? I'll stamp that out right there. Okay, but do you see how this mountain's a little bit lighter? It's like more of a gray. So these trees show up nice and, I don't know, kind of solid in front of it because the image in the background is lighter, okay? So it kind of pushes back that image in the background a little bit more. Maybe I could have stamped it out a little bit light, you know, even lighter than that one, but I think that still looks okay. The trees still show up nice and strong against that texture in the background. All right, so that's it as far as our kind of initial composition. I might add some foreground into this later, but I'm not really used to this type of paper, but it is fairly absorbent, okay? It's more absorbent than glossy cardstock. Glossy cardstock has that extra thick coating right over the top of this coated paper, okay? I have a feeling that, I don't know how they do the silk weight one, but I have to imagine there's some sort of sheen that's applied to that that makes that less than matte, okay? All right, now let's go back to that concept of kind of adding movement into a scene, okay? It'd be easier for me to go in and color this in. Okay, this is going to be kind of like a cool, wintry type of setting right here. So I could just add blue tones like that and give this a nice kind of still kind of you know, nighttime type of winter scene, setting. But I want to give it a little bit more movement, like, you know, kind of like the first snow of the year or something like that, and there's a little bit of breeze kind of coming in, like little blustery type, you know, periods. And that's what I'm going after right here. But how do you show and depict kind of movement, okay? Well, an easy way is to just utilize, let me see some different colors here. Let's go with, I'll go with a range of blue tones. Okay, let's use the Distress Ink Tumbled Glass, because a lot of you have a lot of the Distress Inks, okay? They're super popular. I love them too, but I also like some of the brighter colors of Marvy. I might utilize it in here if I just don't, if I can't get the brightness that I'm kind of going after. Brightness, intensity, etc. Okay, now I have the Tumbled Glass re-inker. Okay, now you can do this straight out of the pad too, you know, by taking your applicator and just inking it up in your pad like that. But I like to get a little bit more tone, or a lot more tone, okay? And it's just, this is going to be, it's like creating an applicator, you know, right on your, or it's like creating an ink pad on an applicator itself, but I don't want to take my, you know, ink pads and just go like that with it. You know, there's not a lot of control over that, but this applicator like this, I just kind of wad it up like this. You can use a sponge, you know, some sort of rag or whatever, etc. Okay, but anyways, let's see. Okay, now here's my question. Do I want to go with this kind of streaks down this way? Or do I want to come this way? Let's go this way, okay? All right. This is going to be a little bit kind of crazy looking, but this is how it goes, okay? See this like this? I'm just going with this streak like this, okay? And it's through this motion like this. Now, if you're not used to doing this, it might feel strange because you're probably used to coloring with a pen like, you know, like this, okay? But what I'm doing, the motion I'm going for, is more of a gestural one like this, okay? All right? So what it looks like on an applicator is not like this and then up, okay? I'm going like this, okay? And it's easy enough to do. You just, if you kind of stick with the ergonomics of your hand will naturally go like that. So if you can't do that, it's probably because you're just not used to kind of making kind of a gestural motion like that, at least in terms of your art supplies, okay? But it's easy to get into because that's the way your hand naturally wants to move, okay? It's nice and ergonomic, okay? And I'm not pressing hard, I'm just kind of touching the paper. I'm kind of touching a little bit harder than just kind of doing a streak like that. It's like the difference between like a push broom and a kind of a whisk broom. You're whisking stuff out the door. You're not taking a broom and going like this and then up, okay? So see, here's that kind of gestural motion. I'm kind of working into it, okay? Then I'll work back this way. I am kind of smearing some of my ink, but that's not going to be a problem because this is going to get much darker anyway. Okay, now here's the thing now. Leave it a little bit streaky, okay? That's where that motion is going to come into play. See like that? See these streaks here and there? Okay, right up there. I didn't plan for most of this. I don't know, it just kind of happened. And whatever kind of remains after those first few strokes like that, I'm just going to kind of stick with it. I might add a little bit more shadows at the base of some of these trees, okay? Like this. Whatnot. I mean, I'm kind of done with this first layer, and it's just, you know, I don't need to add any more. So that's how fast it could potentially go with, you know, this re-inker on here, okay? All right, now watch this cabin here. See this cabin? I'll put a little tone on the side of the cabin. Maybe a little bit on the roof, just so it's not so anemic, you know, and with that tone. But see how I put that tone on the side of the cabin, but not on the rooftop? Now, doesn't it look a little bit more three-dimensional? The lighting looks like it's coming from above. Okay? Yeah, the mountains, I don't know. I mean, if you just, if something's too stark white and you want to tone it in a little bit, then go ahead. You know, let your eye be the judge of it and kind of trust your eye. You get a little bit more used to it, you know, the more you do. Okay? If you've never done this before and, you know, you're just kind of applying it, it's like, you know, I understand there could be a, you know, do I add more? Do I add less? You know, did I add too much? You know, should I not have done that? You know, that comes into play, but, you know, with your first color, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if I did this 10 more times, this would come out looking 10 different ways. You know, just from the sheer amount that I lay down. I might have left more white up there, whatever. Okay, now, after that ink, I probably poured out a little bit too much re-inker fluid. Maybe I'll just mix. I'm mixing inks right here. This is a Memento Danube blue. I don't know if people have these Mementos, but if you do, now see, I'm just using the same applicator right here, okay? It'll create a combination between tumbled glass and the Danube blue by kind of using the same one, okay? Same thing, okay? Lighten up on your kind of your stroke though, okay? Because you're going a lot darker, so I'm kind of getting fingerprints here. But do you see where I'm talking about gesture? Do you see where that's kind of coming into play? See this right here? I'm kind of staying in one area and kind of extending that streak out, okay? So what I mean by that is I'm kind of going like this. See this streak right here? And I'm staying with it in one area, okay? And then that's how you can get this long, elongated one. A lot of people do this. Okay, so you're doing this type of thing, okay? Don't do this. Just kind of stay in one area and make these longer kind of gestural types of applications, okay? It's like you're taking a strip like this, and it's like you're stretching it out. Think of it like rubber or something like that, and you're kind of pulling on it like that, okay? And then see, then I might come over here. See, then it leaves this white streak coming up this way, but these ones are going down this way, okay? Okay, now this one I'm finding, it could be the heat here, it could be the paper and surface, but I feel it's starting to really kind of get dry on me. By quite a bit. I can feel this kind of pulling on here. I think the last time I did that scene, I switched to a sponge. So a kitchen sponge would be fantastic for this too. Okay, but see that streak, kind of that windy kind of swoosh, you know, that's going in there. That's where you get that movement, okay? And movement in artwork, visual movement could be, it can add to kind of the visual dynamics of a piece. Okay, now, for me, I like to go kind of with a darker perimeter. Okay, let's see in here. Let me get a little bit of this color swooshed in here. See, this is where the colors are a certain type of saturation and intensity right now. And that's kind of what I want out of my distressings. I want things to be kind of an earthy type of whatever hue they are, okay? Hue, H-U-E. But sometimes I like a little bit more vibrancy, so this is where I like to use some brighter tones, whatever brand it might be. I find that it's an easy way to go with Marvy inks. They're a little bit brighter, okay? So this is those two blues so far. Let's see what the Marvy looks like. Okay. Do you see that in there? That blue now. So you can see it down here. I mean, it's not a huge jump. It's not a huge jump in value or anything like that. But the intensity goes up. But I don't want it to be intense everywhere. I like the combination of bright and dull. Not dull in terms of interest, but dull in terms of intensity. I like to have a nice range of intensity in my scenes. So Marvys are often a great complement to other brands of inks that just don't have that same vibrancy to them. You can't get these pads anymore, but you can get the re-inkers and blank pads if you want. And I just get them right off the Marvy website. I'm not affiliated with them whatsoever, but I've just I always got to try to be diplomatic about pads and ink colors and whatnot. And I love all of them that I've ever tried before, you know, from pigment inks to other brands of dye-based inks. I like the Sea Brights and Seashells, Vivid pads. Gosh, I don't know. It goes on and on. Impress. It goes on and on. But the Marvy ones just are brighter. Okay. A bit more brightness in there. I'm kind of leaving some of this area light down here. Let's get a little bit of that Marvy in there. But then let's have a very dull version of it, okay? See that? So don't re-ink, you know, all the time. Keep utilizing your dryer applications of whatever ink you're working with so that you can really maximize its potential from the brightest it can be, which is straight out of pad, to the lightest and dullest it can be by using a dry version of it, okay? I use my dry versions of inks more than I do the straight out of the pad version, okay? Because I keep using it and using it and using it, you know. And that's one of the things that I think people, I don't know, when they're first learning how to apply inks, that's the thing that they have to get used to as well. They have to get used to kind of this notion of using a much drier version of their inks. They're not used to doing that, you know, in terms of coloring something. When they want a certain color, when they first start up, they're going for that color only. They're not going for that color to a lighter version, all the way to white, okay? But that being said, all I'm doing is I'm just using a drier applicator, okay? All right, and this is a Prussian blue. It's a pretty dark blue. You can just go for any type of, you know, navy blue. I can feel the ink starting to kind of build up on this paper. The paper is starting to achieve kind of a super saturation in terms of the surface and pulp of the paper. So when that starts happening in this kind of layered dye-based ink type of process, it happens the same thing with things like pigment inks if you're layering them, and hybrid inks too. you'll find that the paper, the application process becomes a little bit different the more you work on it because you're working on a different surface. Now I'm working on quite a saturated surface right here, where in the beginning I was working on a very dry surface, so you adjust accordingly. So you just have to kind of go off the feel. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, when I started working on this, or when I got to like that second color or so, it felt like the first color, the surface was getting a little bit drier. It's because that first ink, kind of soaked into the, beyond the surface of the paper, into the pulp of the paper, so it felt a little bit, that second ink, it was kind of dragging a little bit, okay? But this will continue to dry. Okay, so see, here's that darker version. See that kind of motion like that? See, this is, my motion of my hand. I'm not trying to force it like this or something. I'm just kind of going like this. So my hand naturally curves like that. So that's what I'm doing right here, okay? So it's a nice ergonomic motion, okay? All right, I think that is it in terms of my blues. That's about as dark of a blue as I can get. So what I do is I return to my black ink now, okay? Let's use the same applicator. This one's getting pretty chewed up, this paper towel here. But it's still working pretty good. You can get a pretty good amount of mileage out of it too, okay? It's starting to fray quite a bit on me, but so be it. That's fine. I only have one color to go, and with the darker tones, I'm a little bit more perimeter oriented with it. I don't go into my scene quite as much. I might bring in some kind of grayscale tones into it, but for the most part, I add much more ink using the lighter colors, okay? Yeah, I can feel this right now. It's really kind of grabbing. I think this ink is starting to dry on me quite a bit. Not the black, but, the surface right here. See this kind of real streakiness? Doesn't that kind of give you this feeling of kind of movement and like wind or something like that? And see, I'm kind of coming down from this way. And then to get over here, I'm doing it this way, in this direction, okay? See, that's an ergonomic move, okay? See, if I'm going like this right here, I don't want to start from in here because I'm going to give, a stronger swipe here. And doing this is not ergonomic, okay? So what you do, you just flip it around, and it's just like that, okay? I like to kind of darken up my perimeter. This is where you get kind of you kind of blend in some of that textural kind of busyness from all the different imagery stamped, on your surface area here. It's definitely looking real blustery now. I don't know if I wanted it that blustery, but that's what we have, so I don't know. It's real hot in Southern California, but I'm not sure if I want to be out in like a negative, 20 degrees wind chill factor. Maybe that's too cold. Okay, all right. Kind of anchoring down those trees with a little bit more black ink down there, okay? All right, let's go a little bit darker in the corners like this. I'm kind of giving it a vignette. I always say kind of, I call this tipping the edges. It's getting the edges kind of darker. It's just creating kind of a vignette around the whole like this, and it kind of breaks the, or helps to kind of break the super rectangular hard edge format of a, a rectangular piece, 90-degree angles like this. When you kind of get the corners like that, it kind of rounds everything off a little bit more, and I don't know, I think it makes it a little bit more, I don't know, maybe harmonious or something. Okay, so that is the color application. All these little crumbs all over this piece of paper here. Okay, now this is not the ideal detailed color applicator, as you might, figure. Okay, now this is, I'm doing more of a monochromatic approach to this scene. I mean, I could do this cabin in some brown tones or something like that, or tan tones, okay, but I'm not going to do that. Well, I don't know, maybe. But, so I'm going in here, and you know what I said about kind of coloring in the side of it with some tone, giving it kind of a little bit more of a three-dimensional look, okay? So I'm just doing the same with some alcohol markers, okay? And I'll try some different tones of alcohol markers, but this rooftop's looking a little bit too anemic, just only white, so you can go into it with markers, or, they're just going to be better detailed application tool. Okay, this is a little bit of beige. I'm going to warm up that cabin just slightly, okay? It happens to be a very, very light value, even for beige, okay? Put some of this on the fence. I don't want to do it like a brown cabin. It would just, it would stand out too much in contrast in this piece. I'm looking at here, I forgot about, let's use a little bit, let's go one more color on here. Let's go with the Caribbean blue. Do you notice any difference between this blue and the others? It's a little bit, it has a touch of warmth in there, like a touch of green. Okay, let's use this. I want to just, I don't know, I want to make this a little bit friendlier. Do you see that swipe right there? That tone? It just kind of warms it up just a touch, okay? Let's layer it in some areas here. What I'm doing is I'm changing things ever so slightly in terms of value. It's not really making it darker, but when you introduce a slight warmth into the piece, you can change, potentially, the emotional quality of a piece by adding in a touch of warmth. So a lot of times in cool tone scenes, I like to add a little touch of warmth into it. It could be very subtle. It could be a little bit of yellow over the top of a blue moon or something like that. Not canary yellow, but just a real pale version. But here's this little bit of a warmth in here. So I think it feels different, especially kind of in that area right there. But we still have the gesture of all that hand application movement. It's really fun stuff, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things you can... This is just one way to do it. You can create visual movement, too, by tilting your entire composition, where it's just kind of stamped at an angle, too. Here's a little bit of a melon here. It's a very pale green, You can add some of that here and there. And of course, it's harmonizing with, the blue, because they're right next to each other on the color wheel. But I just do very light touches like that. See that? Okay. Let's go in and have some additional fun. All of it's fun, but let's go in and add some of this white pigment ink with a cotton ball, okay? Now, with it so much movement into here, there probably wouldn't be any kind of fog, but this is stamping, so let's say that there's a little bit of fog in here and mist, because I like a textural change in here. And this also kind of helps to kind of make all that texture down here a little bit more in harmony by not having it quite so apparent. So by adding some of this little fog and mist in here, it makes some of those impressions lighter, okay? Instead of it being so crisp, right? So we have all of these crisp impressions, which is what we want. We don't want blurry impressions or something like that. But you just go in here like this, and you add a little bit of this white pigment ink. Whenever anyone tries this for the first time, they use way too much pigment ink. It's like blob, 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 okay? Now my pigment ink pad is perfect right now because it's kind of medium dry. But if yours is brand new, which a lot of yours are, well, even if it's not brand, it could be 10 years old, but if you haven't used it so much, you can go into this, and it could be just sopping wet with ink. Just blot it off a little bit, okay? And then start applying it, okay? Like, even my first couple taps like this, there's a little bit too much, so you just kind of stick with it a little bit more, and just kind of spread it around, okay? I like adding it at the base of some trees. I usually don't add it in the darkest of areas, but see, I'm kind of hanging around this kind of illuminated area where there's still some light that was created by the absence of a lot of color. There's a lot of color over here, which means that you wouldn't like see like glowing fog or something like that usually, you know. Because if it's dark, you're saying that there's no light hitting over there, you know, so how would it, you know, be there to illuminate any fog? Get it? So in the dark, don't put any light, which is what white on dark creates, okay? See that kind of lighting down here? All right. Would it be out there? I don't know. I mean, you can use a little bit of it. See how it takes like 20 taps or something like that? Oh, very light taps for it to show up like that. I mean, that looks pretty good right back in there. I don't want to add like a ton of it down there, okay? See, this is kind of a lighter area right in here, so I can, you know, apply a little bit more of this like this. And isn't that kind of fun like that? Okay, so let's go and add a little bit in here. When this starts to dry, which is, you know, pretty immediate, it will dry darker than what it looks like when it's freshly applied. So see that right there? I mean, that might stand out a little bit too much, but when it dries, it'll kind of mellow, and it'll sit into the scene a little bit more. So I go a little bit more than what I think what I think looks good visually, okay? Now, if this was glossy cardstock, if I don't like something, it'll wipe right off, no problem. But on kind of matte or on this one, it might kind of stick a little bit more. But I'm not really worried about that either, so. Okay. Okay, now, see this kind of wispy area up here? Let me see, I haven't done this before, but, or I've done it with a Q-tip. I don't think I've done it with, you know, cotton ball. Let me see if I can go, see how I came down here with the colors like that? Let me see if I can go up into the darkness with this, kind of in a wispy motion, you know, to give it a little bit of a... Now this is so dry, I'm not getting that kind of wisp. Let me see if I can go a little bit more. Looks okay. It's kind of that yin and yang thing, you know. You kind of go into the white paper with that, and then you kind of go into the darkness with the white. Actually, that's looking okay. Let me try to get a little bit more. This is where kind of having a wetter ink pad would be good. Let me see if I can get kind of the hang of it here. I'm probably using the wrong applicator too, but I kind of have to go, I find I have to kind of go with a kind of a lighter touch. Because if I go over it too many times, I'm kind of wiping off the thing that I already kind of applied. Okay, there we go. A little bit. Okay, so there's kind of those wisps with white like that. It kind of completes it though a little bit, doesn't it? Let me see if I can kind of get a little texture. It's a little bit blobby. I kind of like it though. Let's add some more of it like so. See that like that? Kind of keeps it in that direction at least, like that. Okay, so there's a little bit more movement. Down below seems a little bit quieter with that kind of, you know, setting kind of mist in there. Okay, now let's kind of continue on. I mean, we can leave it at that, but this Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, you would think I'm endorsing them, but I'm not. I don't endorse really anything, but I just use what I like. But this Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White is incredibly fun. It's a super, super opaque white watercolor paint. And, you know, we're talking about kind of movement, you know, in scenes, visual movement, okay? So what more, I don't know, I guess there could be more stuff, but it's certainly one of those things that can add a lot of visual movement into a piece. And we're talking about splatter painting something, you know, like this, okay? Looks like I have some crusty paint from the last time I used it, but... Okay, so I just reconstituted some of that ink. I want to make it a little bit waterier. You don't want it too watery, but I want this to be... See if I can get some really good splatters. Most of the times when I'm doing this, I get little round, perfect little dots, specks, okay? But this one, I'll see if I can get some kind of longer splatter drops. Okay, so let me see how I'm going to do this. Okay, let me hold this up like this so you can see. I'm going to come from the direction, you know, that those swipes were coming in, okay? Let me see if I can do this. Okay. I don't know if it's not really going in that direction, but it's okay. I wanted to get some kind of maybe I need to go like this, more at an angle. Okay, let me try that. Yeah, a little bit. Okay. From a textural standpoint. I think it adds to the movement a little bit. Yeah, let's go a little bit more down below. Don't worry if you splatter your hand. This paint really comes off easy, you know. What doesn't come off really easy, sometimes the dye-based inks, okay, but like this ink right here, that paint washes off like instantly. It's really a fantastic medium. And I always just, you know, this can dry just to a completely crusty, you know, hard toothbrush. If I put it under water a couple times, washes right out. It really reconstitutes really very, very quickly. Okay, so anyways, there's the flurry of fresh snowfall. And this is, I don't know, it might even, look at that on my finger there. It dries really quickly, so we can go into it right now with some additional imagery. Okay, I'm going to hit it with some leaves. And these little dots are kind of raised because it's a splatter of paint. Now, it's not super high, like embossed or anything like that, so like sticking out, but it does have some height to it. So I just think that using my Versafine black pigment ink will kind of cover that those dots faster. Now, like I said, when I first started stamping this out, I could have stamped these leaves, you know, to begin with. I just think it'll give me a little bit more kind of dimension by doing these last, okay? First of all, by doing them last, I'm not going to have the white paint over the top of the leaves, okay? They might show through some of those areas in between them, but by and large, the this pigment ink will cover up. So just from a depth standpoint, okay, stamping them afterwards, it just creates more space, okay? And doing them in the Versafine black. Now, you can't stamp in Versafine black and then just start toning over them. You're going to smear all the Versafine black. But I'm saying I could have stamped those leaves in dye-based ink and went over it. But just, I think this just looks so much better to just wait till the end of the scene to do these foreground styles of images with pigment ink. Now this pigment ink, it is an oil-based pigment ink, and some of these pigment inks just, with certain types of paper combinations, they just don't dry. It might take a really long time. Maybe it just doesn't dry at all. Maybe, and you have embossing, detailed emboss paper, maybe just emboss them. I mean, that would really be fantastic too. It would give it an extra three-dimensional dimension. But look at those leaves up there. Okay, now we have this area down here, okay, that is stamped in the Marvy black. But let's go in and utilize this, again, for some additional depth, okay? I stamped them out in Marvy black, these reeds, but now let's stamp them out in Versafine black, okay? It doesn't mean like, oh, we're redoing the leaves. What these impressions of the Versafine will look like is that they're just part of the same, grassy foreground, but these ones are just closer to you. These blades of grass are closer to us than the Marvy blades, okay? So you have lighter black, which is more like a 95% gray in there, and then you have the darker black. So you have this kind of foreground in here that's set apart from the background, okay? Now there's a lot of foreground areas in here, but it really gets pushed back by having something much darker right over the top of it. Okay, so anyways, let's take a look here. Now I could go in here and, with like a white paint pen and designate certain areas in here with a little bit more detail and highlighting on certain things, but I'm not going to do that. I think the point of the kind of the visual motion in there is kind of, I don't know, it's been established a little bit with the use of the, the kind of application method. Now, a lot of times I do those streaky types of things, when I'm adding in colors, but it's usually more of a horizontal one instead of coming in like this over the whole thing. But I don't know, we got a little bit of movement up there. Up top, there's this kind of pulling of, I don't know, tone and light within here. It's a little bit subdued in here. I don't see it as much, maybe because of all my white pigment ink work. But, I don't know, there's a certain type of mood that's kind of established with diagonals in the piece, okay? Like I said, you can, skew things and have the whole thing diagonal, where it's, the visual weight is kind of like, out of balance, and it's kind of sliding, in one way. But the other thing you can do is just do it with tone. And what I'm looking at right now is looking at some of that white pigment ink up there. I think it worked out pretty good, having that little white pigment ink up there. It's kind of an interesting texture. I usually don't do that. I usually just kind of keep it around the lighter areas, but just kind of adding in that second texture in there kind of reiterates what we did with the colored inks. All right, so anyways, there we have it. This is a really good example of that kind of silk weight, Look at that shininess of the Versafine oil-based pigment ink in there over the top of... See, that's kind of more satiny. You feel it like that in here, this paper. But the oil-based pigment inks really kind of stand out in a visual sense from both a value, darkness, and a reflective, I don't know, kind of a textural difference, I guess, from the rest of the scene. You know, it's kind of glossy against, I want to say matte, you know, but it is kind of this satiny silk texture, okay? So, and when this dries, I did another scene recently, and even when that dried, there was that kind of that contrasting textural difference between the imagery. So even when the Versafine dries, it is still kind of, it's not as glossy, shining it, you know, as it is right now, but it is mostly. And then when I spray that, I don't know, I think I'm going to spray it with a workable fixative, a matte fixative, just to keep that kind of that spirit, but it will matte down the glossiness of that. So maybe what I do is I just kind of spray it on the interior a little bit more, and with the perimeter things just a little bit less, just enough to fix them down a little bit more than having them completely exposed. So anyways, okay, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. And thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.